What's happening, everybody? Welcome back to Dynamo DeFi. My name is Patrick, and on this channel I talk about cryptocurrency, decentralized finance, and economics. So if you enjoy those topics, be sure to like this video and subscribe. Today's video is the first interview that I'll be doing on the channel. I'm branching out a bit on the channel, and moving forward I'll be looking to interview various experts in the crypto space, founders, other YouTubers, and experts from other fields who might bring an interesting and unique perspective to the crypto market. First person that I'll be interviewing is Felix Cao, who's a marketing expert and successful mobile app developer who is now pivoting to the crypto space. I had the chance to meet Felix through Twitter, and I thought he brought a very interesting perspective on how crypto projects can become more user-friendly and how they can better market themselves. Timestamps at the bottom as always, and hope you enjoy the video. Let's get into it. Welcome to the show, Felix.
Hi, Patrick. Thank you for having me on your show. It's a pleasure to be here.
Pleasure to have you. I've been trying to get Felix on the show for a while. This is the first interview on the channel. So Felix is a marketing expert and successful app developer going back to 2010. He's been featured in the Huffington Post, Adweek, Thrive Global, Authority Magazine, and other publications. He's appeared on radio shows to discuss neuromarketing as it related to the 2019 Canadian election. And he's done a lot more cool things. He's getting involved in the crypto space now. Felix, do you want to share any more about yourself?
Well, thank you for having me on your show, Patrick. I definitely appreciate it. And it's a great honor to be the first guest on your show. And I know that, we're going to have a very exciting conversation for your audience here. And thank you for the very gracious introduction. I'll just piggyback on some of the things that you mentioned. So in this case, I guess the best thing to really talk about is kind of like how we got here in the first place, right? So we'll touch on, my journey, which started really almost 2 decades ago in terms of the sales and marketing world. A lot of that was initially in the finance world and real estate world. Did that for a few years, and that pretty much took us to 2010, where we started to see a big shift from the days where BlackBerry was dominant to the more the iPhones and Androids. We're starting to become, more of the daily dominant mobile devices that people were using. So it was almost like when we looked at it was internet in your pocket. And we knew how, just from the 2000s, how big internet was. Everyone was excited. Remember when you got mail, for example, and everybody would run home and check their email. So, we just noticed that now all that level of excitement and curiosity would also carry itself pretty much 24/7, as people would be connected to the internet around the clock with their mobile phones. And, at first it started off with there's a lot of leisurely fun. Games were really big, which we got involved with. And then, we started to build our flagship, which is in the world of social networks. And of course, you had Instagram, Snapchat, and we were fortunate enough to be named in the Huffington Post alongside with Snapchat as one of the 7 apps that's changing the way that people communicate. So that was an honor to be mentioned in that group as well. And then what really became really big was working with influencers and emoji apps. So we worked with a lot of influencers to bring their emoji apps to the app stores during the 2016-17, when there was obviously a lot of attention around the emoji apps at that time. And then what I saw, as the mobile ecosystem became more mature, was that there's a new field that was emerging, and a lot of that kind of pegged on to the evolution of technology. Whereas a lot of things were in 2D, and we were now starting to see, especially when Facebook had acquired Oculus in 2014, it took some time for that narrative to come out, and it's still becoming more mature as we speak, but it's more relevant today, especially with the realization of VR and AR. So when we saw kind of that transition and evolution into that technology, that's when Neuromarketing, my company, which focused on how the brain processes information and how the consumer processes marketing stimuli. We looked at that as in terms of the virtual reality technology is how people would respond to whatever it is, the game or whatever it is that they're immersed in. So we want to really focus on that side of things with the marketing aspect that's based on, is pretty much brain-based marketing, and we can touch more on that later in terms of the neuromarketing. And then of course that segue into crypto, because crypto, a huge part of that will be the metaverse, right? So NFTs, games, that's pretty much what I see as the portal into the metaverse world. And then crypto is really kind of like the granddaddy that brings everything together and makes people understand that this is where they need to be moving into the future. So that's what took that's where it brings us today with our conversation, Patrick.
Great. Thank you for sharing that. I definitely want to touch on some of the things you mentioned with marketing, as far as what neuromarketing is and which crypto projects you see doing compelling marketing, or how you think there could be areas for improvement. But first, you mentioned the metaverse and NFTs attracting you to crypto. Was that the first thing that got you involved in the space?
Well, what I really looked at it was really, so I've been in the space for probably close to about 2 years, right? So during that time, it was more of a shift in terms of the economic system. So as things were really, and this has been many, many years, and we're all familiar with how inflation is really increasing, and so that's debasing the dollar. And crypto is really, when I look at it, especially for DeFi, as a way to really create yield that outpaces inflation, right? So of course that's one of the main things, and the other main thing is decentralized, meaning you would have ownership of your data and your keys and all that other good stuff. But that's really when I start to look at the ecosystem, how it's changing. That's how I saw from a financial point of view. Not from a technical point of view, is obviously understanding that, okay, like the metaverse is where people want to be, because if we talk to 99% of the people, it's either they're going to want to become someone that they're not, and they're going to want to own things that they don't have. And what does the metaverse allow people to do? Do both, right? So from a human nature point of view, and this is the neuroscience behind it, was that those are two aspects that if we ask any individual, there's something that they want to do or own that at that particular moment they're not able to do for whatever particular reason. But if they're able, let's say at this particular moment, put on their their VR helmet and enter this world where they become XYZ and own XYZ and live the life that they want, that is a game changer. And I think that's why the metaverse will be so important. And of course the technology needs to get there, but that's the kind of like the motivating factor of entering crypto is obviously the financial side, but then understanding that this is where people are going to spend most of their time, very similar to how the internet was. People are spending time online, and then mobile came, people spending times on their phones. Here, the metaverse, nobody knows how it's going to be. We just think that everyone's going to have a helmet strapped to their face, or it could be like a contact lens that, everything that the virtual world is filtered through. But at the end of the day, I believe that's where, a lot of people are going to be wanting to spend their time.
Yeah, I'll admit, I was actually a metaverse and virtual reality skeptic for a long time, because my thought was, if you're doing interesting things in real life, what do you need it for? But then it kind of clicked with me. We're already spending, most people, at least people who watch this channel probably, are spending most of our days either on the computer or phone. Right now, we're in a video chat. It's a natural progression to then put on the helmet or glasses, and we're in the video chat, but we're actually sitting across the table from each other. We're not sitting in front of a computer. And maybe there's some technology that needs to advance to get there. But to me, that does feel like a natural progression. I mean, something more immersive is probably better than a social media feed that's just scrolling text in almost every way. And so that's all cool. But one thing I'm interested in talking about is, given your experience building apps in what some people would call the Web 2 space. I mean, I think Web 2, Web 3 kind of, nebulous terms, but we'll say, given your experience making apps in the Web 2 space, what do you see as the biggest areas for improvement that are needed in crypto applications? Because one of the criticisms I hear most often, especially from new people to the space, is that the user experience doesn't feel as intuitive as they're used to.
100%. I agree with that. So there's a lot of things right now, because usually when technology gets built, it's built from a functionality point of view. So it's almost built through the lens of, let's say, a developer, right? So the technology is correct, and how a developer would see it is correct. Very similar to some people who are very, very talented in terms of industry, and they're talking amongst their colleagues. So there's certain lingo that happens where within that community they would understand. But now if we're bringing, let's say, people into that community that may not have that type of background knowledge, then there becomes this big chasm that exists in terms of communication. So we're at a state now where we're looking to figure that out in crypto, where the UI is we're bringing in people that may not have the same level of experience in terms of the development side, where they're going to look at, let's say, the protocol or the DEX, for example, or any of the projects and be like, how do I navigate through this, right? So now the key is for companies at this particular stage is to make their UI now from the consumer point of view and be like, look, if I don't know, if I'm a consumer and let's say that I know nothing about, let's say, even the technologies of like how like the back end, the code and all that stuff of everything works, how would somebody interact with my protocol, right? So with that question in mind, that's when the whole development process changes, right? So now we're more consumer centric rather than developer centric. So at first it does start off with the developer centric view, because the product needs to have some sort of initiation process to take it to the point where now it could have the adjustments to it, to now have the somebody without the experience and the deep knowledge to be able to utilize those platforms correctly. So UI right now is something that definitely needs to smooth itself out if we're looking to have mass adoption. I think the other thing is, especially with all these blockchains almost working independently, so somebody could be on, let's just say on Phantom, for example, but then they have to bridge over to, another blockchain and an ecosystem. That's something that's very confusing to a lot of individuals, because we've never had that type of problem, say, in internet. Like we didn't have to go onto, let's say, one website and be like, oh, if you want to get to here, this is a different path that we have to take, right? So the concept of having to kind of jump from one ecosystem to the next for the regular person, and especially when they own like the same type of token and coin, that's something that could be very confusing to be like, oh, I got to take, let's say, the Bitcoin or a particular version of a coin here, and then bridge it over to this version of a coin here, because they're two different ecosystems. I think that's something that, like, especially with cross-chain protocols, we need to be able to really fix that problem in order to bring in a mass influx of users.
Totally agree. And one thing that I say a lot is that for those of us, and I think that includes you, who spend a lot of time diving into these small DeFi projects and crypto protocols, it feels totally intuitive to be switching between chains and use 5 different chains and always knowing what chain you're on. But most people probably don't want to do that. They're going to be completely agnostic about what chain they're on, and they would rather that it just exist in the background, like AWS or Microsoft Azure or
100%.
whatever database service their traditional website's using. They just want the application to work.
100%. That's all they do. They want to know, okay, if I come to this, is this simple enough for somebody to engage with, right? So as you mentioned, the chains, people just want to be agnostic. So everything runs in the background, right? So all that technology makes everything cross-chain, everything talks to each other perfectly fine. So for the user, they're more concerned with, okay, if I use this particular protocol, that's great, that all that technology, because that's what makes it work. So that has to happen. But from a consumer point of view and a user point of view, they just want to be able to come there, click, and go. Very similar to going on Amazon. Amazon created the one-click buy, make it simple for people, recommend products and so forth. But if we were to step back into behind the curtain, there's this whole apparatus that makes everything work in unison, right? So right now with crypto, it looks like, right now all these blockchains, they're kind of working isolated as isolated islands, and they need to now kind of come together like a Pangea and work together like how the internet does, right?
Mm-hmm. Totally. And there are some interesting cross-chain protocols being built, whether it's for back-end bridging or cross-chain liquidity, things like that. Not to put you on the spot, but are there any people that you see solving some of these challenges that you find interesting right now?
I think I like to talk about in terms of, rather than specific projects, as kind of like the entire challenge as a whole.
Sure.
So of course, like, Rune and Thorchain is cross-chain, but they're obviously had dealt with, several hacks and so forth. But that's the idea, is like we want to be moving into that direction where you know, you have all these ecosystems that are able to talk to each other. And you know, like obviously DeFi kings, they start off on Harmony and now they're on AVAX, right? So you know, it's kind of like those small steps that allow somebody to be able to, let's say, play a game and not really care what chain they're on. So that's the whole idea to make it happen. And on top of that, with like with the subnets, you know, so there's this thing right now in terms of the allocation of resources from a technology point of view, where if you have, let's say, on a blockchain and you have one particular protocol that is, it's really, you know, really there's a lot of, let's say, traffic going through it, right? So they would pretty much suck all the resources from the rest of the protocols in that particular ecosystem. So right now, of course, with the subnets, they're looking to pretty much create kind of like compartmentalized projects. So they have like their own allocated resources, so that whatever happens in their kind of ecosystem or game, let's say in this particular case, doesn't affect everything else around it, right? So that challenge was something that had happened in the early 2000s, especially with servers. And you know, so this will be solved it should be solved in a fairly fast amount of time. So, you know, in 2000s, it was if someone had a server and there was like 10 different websites on it, one website gained a lot of traffic, it would obviously impact you know, the traffic, the amount of traffic that the other ones would be able to process, right? So we're kind of like at that same spot. Whereas today, you know, someone could get a dedicated server, for example, which is equivalent to a subnet, and they would have access, their project would have access to that one set of resources, and it wouldn't matter what was happening around them, right? So that's something that I think needs to be sorted out very efficiently as well, in order for the user experience to increase as well. Because the last thing people want is you know, things that are slowed down because of shared resources.
Very interesting. And I really like the comparison you made to how certain websites would be slowed down in the early 2000s if there was a lot of traffic on a different website.
Mhm.
Where would you place the development of the crypto technology and user experience and everything in comparison to the internet in terms of years? Would you say that we're sort of in the early 2000s? Would you say we're in the 90s?
I would say we are probably in the late 90s, approaching 2000s. So this is probably, if I were to put like kind of like a time frame in terms of where we're at, we're probably around like 97 to about like 99. So that shows how early we are, right? So just give an idea, is like I was in university in about 2000, right? So we didn't, it was back in the day, if we wanted to find our marks, you could not do that online. You'd actually have to physically walk in front of your classroom, and they had, you know, 50 sheets of paper, and you'd be a number, and then you'd have to find and climb over people your number and then find what mark you got assigned. So that year in 2000 was the first year that as students were able to access our marks online. So just think about in 22 years, we came from that to here, right? But there was a time where physically, you know, every student had to do that. And we're kind of like at that point in terms of the crypto technology, like how the infrastructure of it's still getting built. So right now, there's still, of course, a lot of speculation to how it works. You know, how is it going to bring in money and so forth? And every industry that comes in always faces those same challenges. But any company or any industry that actually evolves out of that and becomes really, let's say, a part of our everyday lives, that stuff, all that financial stuff figures itself out. So we're at the point where we're figuring out the technology behind it to make it more efficient and user friendly, but also we're figuring out the financials behind it to actually make, you know, these businesses, if you want to call it protocols, do they work? Are they, is the business model actually feasible? And of course, you know, that's when the tokenomics and all that stuff comes in, and then the marketing, how to bring in people and attract people into your protocol, increase TVL, you know, all that stuff, and then it will matter how the team utilizes and executes after that. But I would say this is, in terms of timeline, late 90s. So it's very, very early in mobile. I got in 2010, and I think this is even before that. And so in 2010, we were making the transitions from Blackberries to iPhones and Androids. So you know, Flappy Bird would be like a year, or not Flappy Bird, Angry Birds, or would be a year after in 2011. So that shows you how early we are in this cycle. So it's exciting to be part of this cycle again. So that's the one thing that attracted me as well, just looking at history over time. In terms of being in the crypto space, is like we're really, really early. It's to the point now, of course, you have institutions that want to enter, and that's going to be, a huge amount of money that's waiting to go into the ecosystem. But I think a lot of that depends on how regulations plays itself out, and also taxation laws as well. But all of us that are listening today and that are part of crypto, consider yourself an early bird.
I think people will be very happy to hear that. And, it should be reassuring to people to think if we really are, say, late 90s, whenever, around 2000, then Google was just getting started, if it had even been founded yet, depending on the year. Facebook did not yet exist.
Correct.
The App Store was a decade out. So a lot of the big apps that will probably eventually be the ones bringing in 1 billion users to crypto, either they are, just getting started in some different form than they will eventually exist in, or they haven't even been founded yet. Because I know we have a limited amount of time, and I have a lot of questions I want to ask you about
Absolutely.
the early tech industry and everything. But one thing I want to make sure I touch on is, I know you do neuromarketing as a main part of your company. Can you talk a bit about what exactly that is, and then if there's any lessons from that could apply to the crypto space?
Yeah, absolutely. So neuromarketing really is this how your brain, or how the consumer brain in this case, responds to marketing stimuli, right? So to really a really easy way to understand that's really, when we look at the brain is really divided into three sections, right? So at the base, and this is, by the way, for the people who don't have a background in terms of biology or psychology, it'll be very simple. So at the base of our brain, it's called the reptilian brain, and really it keeps people safe. So all it matters is it triggers fight or flight type of responses, right? So, and then ascending from that is your midbrain, which looks at more things from an emotional point of view and social situations. And then, of course, at the very top, which is your most developed part of the brain, is your cortex. And that's more considered your logical part of the brain, which considers things such as data, facts, and figures. Now, the reason why I bring that up and why it's important is because the brain processes information in terms of a particular, if you want to call it quote unquote workflow or information flow. And a lot of people, especially, and I see this a lot in crypto, is that when they start explaining their project, they automatically start from a logical point of view. So they'll be like, okay, this is my protocol, this is what it does, and so forth. But the brain, as I mentioned, that's actually the last part of the brain that processes information. Like, I'll give you an example. Here's an example. When we look at DAOs, the meaning behind that astronomical yield was, the reason why it worked is because there was this little thing that you would drag along the bottom that would tell you how many Lamborghinis that you could own, right? So now I'm deconstructing why it works. So the idea of owning 5 Lamborghinis in 1 year, that emotionally people will love that, because it's a huge change in people's lives. So it's like, how does you see, so the meaning behind, let's say, a national astronomical APY is now put into framed in a way where people could put themselves in that position and be like, wow, that would feel good, right? Like that would feel good.
I remember highlighting some of those Lambo calculators. I forget exactly what they were called. And it really was a genius piece of marketing. I mean, it was slightly maybe disingenuous, because anyone who thought about it for more than 10 seconds would realize, well,
what was going on.
Are we really all going to get 5 Lamborghinis? That doesn't make any sense.
Yeah. And I think that was understanding like the financial side of it, because anything that prints that much is going to be highly inflationary. So it's going to cause the price action to really crash. Right. So now it's like, as you mentioned, it's understanding the finances behind the protocol as well. So, it's a combination of educating the public in terms of, not only what the technology is going to do, but also, to get involved in it, there's other financial aspects to have a look at as well.
Interesting. Are there any other examples of neuromarketing that you've seen in the crypto space, or interesting or compelling marketing strategies that you've seen projects use?
Well, I think you and I had talked about this off the air, but I like to introduce into our conversation is and the timing seems to be perfect, especially what had happened with the Oscars. So everybody right now is, we see the meme of Chris Rock and Will Smith all over the place, right? So when we look at the concepts of memes, that's actually almost like a focal point for companies to use in their marketing to start attracting a large amount of audience and make their company or make their content go viral, right? And of course, this stems from a neuromarketing and neuroscience point of view, because what it means is a meme really is just a package of DNA that multiplies. So here, if we apply it to marketing in the world of crypto, is any company that's able to, let's say, create a meme, that meme now has the ability to multiply and show up in pretty much everybody's screen. And I think that is something that, personally, myself as a marketing company, that we help companies, especially in crypto, really start to differentiate themselves. Because the last thing that any company wants is to have the best product that nobody knows about, right? So it's very important to make sure that their vision and their message is communicated in a way where it's going to resonate with their audience and be relatable and shareable.
Absolutely. And one thing we talked about off air a little that is interesting is some of these meme coins that have taken off. And I
Mhm.
don't usually cover these sorts of projects because I focus on ones that are more technically sound. But if you look at the actual market cap and explosive growth, uh, it really is something to behold. I mean, I'll just turn it over to you in a second, but Shiba Inu, for example, uh, little known fact, in addition to this YouTube channel, I also have a crypto meme account on Instagram that I run with a
Awesome.
different name. But if you look over on there on TikTok, for example, just the sheer volume of content that's being created for some of these projects like
Mhm.
Shiba Inu dwarfs things from other projects. And I don't know exactly how that came to be, why that is. But there's something that the technically sound projects can learn from that, I think, because even in the traditional tech space or business space, the largest websites probably aren't the most technologically advanced. They have a combination of product user fit and great marketing.
Exactly. So it is like, as you mentioned, you can't have one or the other on its own, right? They kind of have to work together as a unified entity. And as you brought up, I'm happy that you brought up Shiba, because from a utility point of view, at the time, maybe today, people would make the argument that has zero utility, but the marketing behind that is phenomenal, because what they have created is pretty much a Shiba army, which is a very, very cohesive and strong community. And if anything that has a strong community has the ability to pretty much move markets. So that is, an objective that they may have. Like, I'm not speaking on behalf because I don't know what their objectives are, but this ability to be at the forefront of people's minds, that gives companies and businesses and protocols in this case the ability to attract those eyeballs, to attract that money, so that they have that that the TVL to work with to, let's say, build out their vision, right? So there's two ways to look at it. And I know you and I had touched on this, Patrick, is the companies or protocols could start off from a technology point of view and then communicate that through marketing. And then the other way is, a protocol can have fantastic marketing, attract a very strong community with the liquidity, and then build the technology that they want and move the company in a specific direction. So there's really no right or wrong way to do it. Is this how well the team and what their vision is and mission is after their initial point. So here in Shiba, who knows? Maybe I heard that I have a friend that works as part of their gaming company. So we have to kind of step back and look at how they're evolving, right? So that's always the key. And I think that's where, especially if people are looking to come in, and this is not financial advice, for example, is that we always tend to look at what is rather than what can be. And that's always the key to being kind of like ahead of the curve, right? So if we're always looking at what is, then yeah, there's a lot of things right now that are really, are they really generating a lot of real quote unquote revenue, or is this all investor money? But the thing is, can this thing become, right? That's what is the bridge in terms of how to look at projects, in my opinion. Once again, not financial advice.
Of course, always nothing on this channel is financial advice. That actually sort of makes me think of an interesting aspect of DeFi statistics analysis that I talk about sometimes on Twitter, occasionally on the channel, is a lot of times something people look at is they'll look at the total market cap of a project divided by the total value locked in DeFi.
Right.
And typically, typically the way people look at it is they'll say, well, if the market cap is low compared to the TVL, that means the market cap should go up. And if a project has a very high market cap compared to the TVL, they'll say, well, look, it's overvalued. But another way to look at it is to say, and this, for example, might apply to, and I'm not saying that this is something people should go invest in, but it's something to consider. Is Cardano, for example, has a very high market cap compared to its TVL. The flip side of that you could look at is you might say, well, how much potential does that DeFi have to grow, given that they've built this strong community? And I mean, I think that's one that maybe they are building some things technically, but they really, the marketing is what brought it to the market cap that it is. You say their market cap is so big, their community is so strong, there might be potential for DeFi on there to grow. And although it's still smaller, the DeFi on there has actually been outpacing the market the past couple of months.
Exactly. Like you touched on a very important project. So I know that people were comparing, like, like that's how they're doing compares, like TVL versus market cap. And then, and then they'll compare it to another protocol and be like, hey, this protocol is X amount of time. So if that is true, then this particular protocol that is really highly undervalued. So they could be should be a multiple of whatever the difference is, right? But at the same time, we do have to be cognizant of the community. Let's say in the case of Cardano, or even let's say a really good example is XRP. Like they've been in that legal scrum with the SEC for a long time now, but yet there's still a top 10. So just the fact that they're really, dealing with that situation on a legal stand and still be able to be able to hang in there, quote unquote, shows like how dedicated that community is. So the moment there is a catalyst, let's say that really takes it off, like how does that anticipating, how does that community that already exists, how do they respond to it, and what does that mean for that particular protocol?
And I think one thing that's cool about the crypto space is it also rewards people who are early. And as more things get tokenized, this could also apply to communities, maybe even to music scenes, to artists. Because, for example, imagine you were one of the first 1,000 people to play Angry Birds. What do you get? I mean, that would be cool, right? You could brag to people. I downloaded it when there were less than 1,000 downloads. But if that was a crypto application, then you would be a multimillionaire.
Yeah,
right.
Exactly. Like that's the key, right? So the same thing with that big story of what was it? I believe it was Shiba, right? Somebody put in 8,000, turned to like 5 point something billion. So they had invested in August of 2020, and it sat around, done nothing for many months. But then when it took off, like I don't see how any type of asset class could give you anything close to that. So that's the same idea as like in all the other going back to mobile or internet. Yeah, if you're one of the first adopters, you're just playing the game, right? But here you have the opportunity to participate in the financial results that come from the adoption of that particular project, right? So they provide certainly different opportunities that hadn't existed before, and I think that's exciting for a lot of people.
Yeah, and I think we could probably talk about this for hours.
Sure.
But unfortunately, that video would go a bit long. One thing that's an interesting application I just thought of is there's fan tokens, for example. Some sports teams are making them. And, a lot of people who are, say, into a sports team, for example, I live in Philadelphia, and there's people who are into the Eagles, and they go to every single tailgate, and they sometimes get frustrated with what they call fair weather fans who only become excited about it when they're doing well. Right. Yeah. If you had some sort of fan token that people could accumulate for participating over time, then they would actually financially benefit from being there when the team isn't doing well and isn't popular, because they would get all these fan tokens. So it is interesting. There's a lot of social implications for rewarding people who are early and who are consistent fans.
I think that would be something that would be really big, those type of social coins, quote unquote. Especially a lot of teams are looking to, and they have already issued. I know like soccer teams have done that. There's PSG. There's a couple other ones I remember I was looking at, and it's a great way to either strengthen that community and really give kind of like the fans that are there, regardless if it's good or bad times, to reward them in ways that they can't normally be rewarded. So it brings that level of exclusivity and to their almost like a VIP type of situation to those fans that are like diehard fans, if you want to call it that.
Yeah, totally. Lets them quantify and
Mhm.
reward that. Great. So, like I said, we could probably talk for hours, but we've already been talking for a while. What are your final thoughts on the crypto market, the future of the crypto space, and anything
Mhm.
else you want to share with the viewers?
Yeah, absolutely. I think overall, I'm really bullish on crypto. I think on the long run, crypto will be, and all the tentacles that come out of it, metaverse, it's really going to disrupt every single industry, because you're talking about technology, which gets integrated into all our lives, finances, which is integrated into our lives. When those two factors come together and industries come together, the impact is going to be very colossal. Um, so that's in the long term. In the short term, there's the things that we had talked about, where the technology needs to get better, the user experience needs to become a lot more clean. It needs to, the entire system needs to work together in unison, almost like an agnostic entity. And then, of course, if we factor in how the markets are, there's that in terms of, with regulations, inflation, that will factor into things. What the interest rate that's going to get increase, is it going to be higher than expected, lower than expected? Because the number is not so much what's important, it's what the number is relative to expectations. So that's why it could be, because the numbers is just an absolute value, but we assign meaning when we compare it to something, right? So that's why the whole thing about with this type of APY, you get X amount of Lambos in that calculator, because you're assigning meaning to that particular figure. And here's the same thing when the numbers come out with the FOMC. So there's all those, and now with the yield curve inversion, a lot of people or investors are, they're feeling more safe with putting their money into a 10-year US bond. So that usually that has been an indication of a slowdown of the economy. It's showed strength in 89, 2000, and 06. So if we look at what that had coincided with, is the last recent one, it was the .com, and then more recently the subprime. So here's a little bit different, because there's a lot of money, big money, sitting on the sidelines, looking to almost from the legacy system to enter into crypto. So it's really in this unique place where it's not black or white. And I think that gray area needs to figure itself in terms of how, like the legacy money is going to enter to crypto. And of course, a big part of that will be, the regulations that come to play, and the taxation that that comes to the forefront as well. So it's kind of like this, figuring out this jigsaw puzzle of or this crossroad of where it's going to go. But it's certainly moving in the direction of crypto, though. That's what I will say.
Thank you. Yeah. And one thing I always like to add for people is that we've never actually seen crypto in a full blown recession. So we have some idea based on it being a risk on asset, how it will perform.
Mhm.
But we don't actually have a lot of good examples of that, because it's basically, since Bitcoin started to gain adoption, we've been in a perpetual stock equities bull market.
Right.
Not to mention the factors you mentioned, like money sitting on the sidelines, as well as institutions that are looking to
Mhm.
get in. So it's certainly an interesting time, and I think we're both very bullish on the future of the space. So it's a matter of finding the teams and projects that are building the fundamentals for the future
Exactly.
and are building the apps that will onboard billions of users. If
100%
people
agree.
want to follow you, or is there any website or social media they can
Yeah,
find
absolutely.
you on?
So I'm on Twitter. You can follow me at Fun Crypto Brain. So that's on Twitter, and then on LinkedIn as well. I'm very, very active. That's where so you can just type in Felix Cao, connect with me on there, and then yeah, you could visit my neuromarketing website at happybuyingbrain.com. But I think Twitter is the most applicable place, especially when it comes to the crypto. There's just so much happening. You get bite-sized information, and this the speed of progress. This app is so quick, so that'd be a good place to start.
Fantastic. Definitely check out Felix's Twitter. That's how we connected. He was commenting on a lot of my things, and I said, wow, this guy really has an interesting perspective. Let's get him on the channel. Wonderful. Thanks for coming on, Felix. Hope to have you on again sometime.
Absolutely. Thank you for having me on your show, Patrick. It's been a pleasure to have this conversation and to share some really valuable gems with your audience.
Fantastic. Thank you.